Suguru Geto. Right from the beginning of Jujutsu Kaisen, Geto played an immense role. His intense hatred for non-sorcerers has a concrete reason though.
After the hidden inventory arc, Geto becomes exceptionally determined to achieve a goal that only he can see. However, his reasons stem from much more complex experiences, tipping his moral scale towards the worse.
Geto's character embodies the morally gray entities that humans actually are, making us, as well as other characters in Jujutsu Kaisen, question common reasoning and our own moral compasses on multiple occasions.
How did Suguru Geto turn evil? Or should we be asking, how did his psychology change?
In this video, we will attempt to break down Suguru Geto's descent into the rabbit hole for his disgust of monkeys and eventually succumb to his own death for his goals.
Why did Geto turn evil? There's no simple answer to this question, nor can we really isolate an event for Geto's downfall. His spiral into the worst was an amalgamation of his experiences with people, the flawed system, his own ideals, and even a bit of bad luck.
Suguru first appeared in chapter 65. Geto originally was a student of Yaga alongside Gojo and Shoko at Tokyo Jujutsu High.
And as a student, he believed that sorcerers existed to protect the non-sorcerers. Gojo argued Geto shouldn't be proud of himself for being righteous, and implying reasoning to Jujutsu was just stupid. Their clash in ideology caused them to argue and clash heads as young men.
Later in the hidden inventory arc, Geto and Gojo were tasked with protecting the star plasma vessel, Riko Amanai. Riko was targeted by the cursed user group Q and the star religious group. In the way, these events can be seen as the beginning of Geto's descent and the slow shift of his ideologies.
At the end of this arc, the duo failed to protect Riko, as she's tragically killed by Toshi Fushiguro, a mercenary that was working for the star religious group. Riko's death was a crucial checkpoint in Geto's descent.
Following Riko's death, things slowly began to change. After Gojo defeated Toji, we get a scene of the followers of the star religious group applauding the death of Riko, and this deplorable act stayed with Suguru. During this moment, a newly awakened Gojo even asked Geto, should we just kill all these followers? Geto was actually tempted at this moment, but tried very hard to stay aligned to his ideologies. At this time, Geto could be seen as the moral compass for Gojo, and at this very moment, Geto decided not to kill all these people because it seemed there was not a good reason for it.
He intended to maintain this ideology, but his path became more unclear as time went on. Gojo became the strongest alone, and Geto started going off on more dangerous missions alone. He felt caught in this endless cycle of exorcism and consumption.
After these events, Geto began to question who or why he was doing these grotesque things, remembering the non-sorcerers from the star religious group. That moment burned an image into his head. He saw a hideous evil that day, and even though he did not agree with it, he still chose to protect them. In action, he grows to regret. This slowly starts to fuel his hatred for these monkeys, or non-sorcerers. For the first time, we actually see Geto start to hate all the non-sorcerers, and he starts to believe that Jujutsu sorcerers are actually the superior race of humanity.
Would anything be different if one of these variables changed? I mean, it's hard to say, but with his mindset, Geto's conclusion probably wouldn't have changed. There is, of course, no clear line of the effects of Geto's experiences, but we can look into them closely for the sake of deciphering Geto's character.
As one half of the strongest duo, Geto was strikingly different from Gojo in many ways. Gojo grew up in one of the three big families of Jujutsu society, while Geto came from a more humble background. In truth, this grand idea of righteousness was a farce to Geto. He wanted to believe in this.
To Geto, righteousness and reason meant everything, and so he strove for it too. He had a clear line of distinction between the weak and the strong. To him, the weak and the strong were two distinct beings themselves.
Geto, as well as other Jujutsu sorcerers, saw an obligation to protect these weaker non-sorcerer beings.
Perhaps you could even say something like that Suguru was this archetype of Spider-Man's with great power comes great responsibility. The most important thing to Geto was executing his duty for people he didn't even know. His worth and truth always lay beyond him, dependent on an external factor.
At this point in time, Geto really didn't know the true ugliness of non-sorcerers. He was practically oblivious. He saw the weak as something that he should protect, and he would never let that purpose change. However, his beliefs mainly stem from not fully experiencing the full course of reality.
His moral compass was built to point in the wrong direction eventually. His absolute beliefs and values were put at stake during the hidden inventory arc, and of course as time went on, his beliefs were about to shatter and break slowly but steadily.
Yeah, the hidden inventory arc was an eye-opener for Geto. The death of Riko was a catalyst for Geto's descent. I want to go back and talk about the scene where Geto and Gojo were surrounded by the followers of the Star Religious Group. This memory became a core memory for Geto. This basically became the time that he fully recognized the evil of non-sorcerers. He always believed the weak were something to be protected, but he never realized or was aware of the fact that the weak could also be hurtful, vindictive, or evil. This moment became clear to Geto that these cruel encounters, strong or weak, could have reparable consequences.
Yeah, I think when his moral compass was telling him to protect the non-sorcerers, he definitely was not aware of people who were non-sorcerers but capable of complete and total evil. I think that Riko's death truly began the descent of his character.
And after Riko's death, Gojo and Geto started to drift away. Once Gojo became the strongest, Geto started going on more dangerous missions by himself. He was stuck in the cycle of exercising, consuming curses, and this really started to change him because he started to wonder, why is he doing this? He didn't care for the non-sorcerers after seeing that image of them just clapping for Riko's death. He really started to wonder what was the purpose of Jujutsu sorcerers and what was the purpose of his powers. Why go this far for people who would never even know what they've done? Riko's death and seeing these people clap for her dead body was also disgusting, and it really shaped Geto in a negative way.
This would cause Geto to suffer extremely, and Gojo wouldn't understand Geto's suffering from the distance where he stood at. Gojo had officially become the strongest. He could do anything he wanted, things that were impossible for others to do. He could even realize the ideal world he had in mind. If it's possible for you, can you really go around telling people it is impossible? Are you the strongest because you're Gojo, or are you Gojo because you're the strongest? He got so swept up in his own self that he forgot to even just look around, even at his best friend.
And this played a crucial factor for Gojo as well, but I don't think Geto really cared about empathy from Gojo or from anyone else, to be fair. At this point, Geto was already at wit's end, and he was ready to just make a full dive into darkness. He was fully ready to just change sides and let go of his original ideology of protecting the weak. And what I really want to ask the viewers, do you think Yuki was the final push for Geto?
When Geto had a conversation with Haibara, he already started considering himself the bad guy. He had begun wavering from his ideals and what was drilled in his head. Simply put, he was at war with the two possibilities that had appeared in front of him.
The conversation with Yu Haibara was an important one. Haibara was a good person, and he was a dedicated Jujutsu sorcerer. He perhaps knew some of the ugly sides and things that Geto also experienced, but despite knowing that, he still went forward with his Jujutsu work, and there were gulfs between Geto and Haibara's understanding at that moment. Haibara made even Geto question his own thinking after hearing his own perspectives, but then Yuki came along.
Yuki gave him the assurance of not being alone with dual thoughts, but there was something more significant in this conversation. Yuki inadvertently gave a purpose to Geto's hatred for non-sorcerers. Until this point, he just knew he hated those weak quote-unquote monkeys, but now he could see them holding the strong down.
See, Geto would never act unless there was a reason. He always believed that there's meaning to actions. He kept Gojo from killing the Star Religious group because of that reason, but now it was meaningful. After speaking with Yuki, he realized all that happened and all that was happening was thanks to these monkeys. The weak were ruining the strong. In his ideal, the weak were overcoming the strong, and for what? All that Geto knew after fully experiencing the hatred of the weak, all he felt was just ridicule, hatred, and prejudice.
And even further, these feelings were fueled by Haibara's death and Geto's encounter with the two girls on his mission. Haibara, as we saw, was a good person. He gladly took upon his responsibility, dedicating his life to it. There were hundreds if not thousands of Haibaras in the Jujutsu world, but all Geto could see was a mound of corpses.
Geto was fighting himself with the very thing that he thought was absolute righteousness. How was the strong dying for the weak justified? At this point, Geto started generalizing all sorcerers as good and strong beings. Geto's feelings were set in stone. He hated the weak, and now he could freely kill them as well. It had a purpose, and he would go ahead to achieve it.
The last straw for him was his last mission too. Nanako and Mimiko were sorcerers just like him, who probably also fought with their lives on the line. Yet here they were, locked up, bloody, and accused of crimes. These monkeys hid behind their weaknesses and blamed others. They were ingrates and they were hypocrites.
And that was the moment Geto truly cracked. The images of people clapping applied to the girl's death, the frustration of all of it, seeing these two little girls locked away. Geto's frustration and anger blew up into a full genocide. He then killed the whole village, hundreds of people. And scary enough, this downfall pulls you into the feeling that maybe he was right for a second. It makes you think, was Geto just a victim of self-serving society? We don't really know that. He did take a lot from his experiences. After fully realizing the full course of reality, he started to change, and I do think he was a victim of the Jujutsu system to a degree.
Given all that he's been through, Geto's spiral was just absolutely inevitable, but it was still very unfortunate. Look, Geto was an incredibly kind person. He was polite, he was caring. One can even call Geto emotional and sensitive, a little bit more than average, and I guess that's why it hits harder. He didn't deserve this at all.
However, Geto was still righteous in a sense to the very end. Even though he performed genocide and killed his own parents because they didn't fit this new ideal world that he wanted to strive for, before. His compassion didn't go away, but he redirected it to the strong or the other Jujutsu sorcerers. He took on a new family and he strove to protect and going great lengths for them. He was still Geto at the end of the day, but his ideals had finally found an unshakable ground to rest on.
He didn't need anyone to understand him anymore, like he told Shoko. He knew what he needed to do, even if it came at the cost of sullying his name. His spiral was a hard lesson for all the people surrounding him.
We even see this with Gojo and Nanami, who further emphasized this fact for their students later on in the story. Nanami even said to Yuji that he would like him to remain a child and refrain from doing adult dirty work like the other Jujutsu sorcerers. This is probably because Nanami was someone who closely saw Geto's downfall, and maybe he didn't want another child to shoulder the ugliness of the world like Geto did.
The downfall of Geto is truly a piece of art. You can feel that suffocation and quandary within him. But let me ask you this, was Yuki Sumiko the final push, or was she merely a passerby who meant no harm?
There is no simple answer to this question, but Geto's spiral into the worst seems unavoidable. It feels like a combination of his experiences with people, the flawed system of the Jujutsu world, his own ideals, and a bit of bad luck all played a factor. Although I believe the misfortune of Geto turning evil could happen to anyone else as well if given the circumstances. But what do you guys think about Geto? Let us know in the comments what you guys think.